B'hilchasa. כשיחלוקו בשום דבר, halacha צריך לומר הלכסה כך וכך. When they're arguing about some issue in halacha, they have to say this is the halacha. This is based here. He brings down here now goes Yavitz. Yesh halacha Moshe Sinai. Moshe Chesed Perek Beis Be'er. That's true. Hilchos sometimes means halacha Moshe Sinai. It doesn't always mean they were passing a machlokes. It means, and this is halacha Moshe Sinai. V'chol be'emes halacha, and there's a principle which is not always true, but it's very often true. Then it says be'emes amru, and they said that in truth they said, then it's halacha Moshe Sinai. V'chesed Taisis Redim Maslu Asham the Ashkechon Ase Kra Ahilchasa, that they bring down a pasuk on halacha. I guess that's. I'm not sure what that means to say that, and therefore it's not a halacha Moshe Sinai, or it's sometimes even halacha Moshe Sinai. There's a pasuk which connects to it somehow, but I guess somehow inside of Pakistan is halacha Moshe Sinai, and there's a pasuk which references are not mutually exclusive.
So here's a general question, which is, one time out of 25, the Gemara says v'hilchasa, and all the rest of the time, we have to go to these various rules to figure out what the halacha is. So why is that?
That's a good question. So I think the reason, not that I'm sure about this, but I have my thoughts on this have been that anytime there's a principle involved, well, like the principal is going to learn, it's not necessary for it to say hilchasa. It's not necessary to say hilchasa where the principles do not apply. Okay, like look for example, the first comment here in the commentary. Ain't halacha talmud b'makom harav. Halacha is not like a talmud in a place against his Rabbi. Now that means that anytime in Shas it says it has my place of a talmud with his Rabbi, there's no need for the Gemara to specify that halacha is like the Rabbi. It would have to specify if the halacha is like the talmud, but it doesn't have to specify halacha is like the Rabbi.
Okay.
That's where they talk face to face. You go, came on the rabbi low kibel varav, since the Rabbi did not accept the Talmud's position. And way to say that is shomer amar le ploni. When it says so and so said to him, which evidently means that the Talmud said something to the Rebbe. Shomer ploni amar lo. If it says ploni amar, then it doesn't necessarily mean that they're speaking face to face. Amar le ploni, obviously there's a lay. It means they're just being face to face. Then we paskin like the Rebbe automatically. Just said ploni amar, they didn't necessarily speak face to face, and it's possible that in that case we're going to pass like the Talmud. Okay. Because of our going, im atalmid harich yamim achar rabo. If the student lived long years after his Rebbe, he's got a b'chachma, became great in wisdom. Come on, so why should he pass like the Talmud? The Talmud actually became greater than the Rebbe. But may abide v'rav elach hilcha halacha b'tzroi. And everybody says from Rabbi, Rabbi, and subsequently, Allah is always like the later opinion. Va'afilu Talmud Makom Harav. And even if it's a Talmud Makom Harav, which previously would have said Allah is like the Rab. No. Later on we say Allah is Batzroi. I was like later generation, which includes a Talmud is the later generation than the Rebbe. Okay. Before Abai how much kibul mirabah. Before Abai Tamim only say over that which they makabel from the Rabbi. Zesh trying to Bryce Rabbi Chia, is that Bryce of the Pliny? This will learn the Bryce of Chia. There's a Bryce of some other town. Abo me Abai Rav of Elach. But from Abai Rav and Amr's Choku Kol Hadeyos. That's fascinating. It says Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai. There's a couple of pages of shots. He was bucky about Vias Abai Barava. He was very, very knowledgeable in the pathways of Abai Barava. Obviously, the question is, Abai Barava lived over 100 years after Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai. So that means he was very, very conversant with the pathways of Abai Barava. So what it means is that Havayas, Abai, and Rava are a new type of learning, which Abai and Rava introduced, so to speak, on a widespread basis. And until then, were not necessarily widespread. I would say Yochanan Zakkai was capable of that form of learning as well, not just the old form of learning, right?
Okay.
As they say that until by brother, people used to cite prices. They might ask questions from one price or another price, but the main thing was citing price, right? I had this price, you had that price, and then we have to resolve which price was correct. But for Abai, Rava, and after Kitzur Klallim, they analyzed all the opinions. And sometimes they find that the Rebbe is going in a pathway which is not halachically correct. That's it says sometimes it says that we Abai and Rava, we learn 13. We have 13 ways to learn Masechah Zukti. And as times Rabbi Yehuda, the Rebbe, or one of the previous generations, I should say, not the direct Rebbe, they only learned. They didn't even learn Uktzin. So it comes out that obviously there was a different type of learning which ensued in the time of Abai and Rava. Right? Abu made Harav didn't exist. Because of those that was Giddish is that that's only when he argues with that we could bask in like the Talmud. No, I think it's only what we argues with him. I guess it means that we pass on the Talmud. I think it's going back on that. But I want to get back to this in a second before, which is we go on. So therefore, after Abai and Rava, Hilchos Basroi, because he assumed the later generation saw everything the earlier generation wrote, analyzed it, and then took it further. That's why Elona's going to go like Basroi, because they took learning to a different level. And they would have been very meticulous in understanding how things work and what's the proper svara and what's not the proper svara. That's why the Pascha Basroi.
They were like the third generation of Amoraim, right?
Right. They lived around 350.
Okay.
Because of Seches Gittin, she said that if they're having a discussion, Maxwell, I asked him a question. I guess the Talmud asked the Rabbi a question. I'm assuming that's the case. I was just asking Maxwell Magam He says perhaps not. I guess that we don't pass him like the Talmud because he's not actually differing. He's asking. He's inquiring. Not the same thing. What's that? Actually, only when Lasker says the things Mishmeidin Avshay in his own name. Really? Mishmeid Acher Lo. That's a big chiddush. It's only when he says in his own name, not when he says in somebody else's name. That's pretty amazing. In other words, I guess the Talmud is the Talmud when it says in his own name, it has one second.
Well, so we're assuming that he's Choker Koladeos.
Yes.
Right? If he's a Barai and he's saying his own name, we're assuming he's Choker Koladeos.
Yeah.
If he's saying in the name of somebody else, then we're don't necessarily rely on that somebody else to have been Choker Koladeos, right?
Right. So I assume that's the case, yeah. I was read I jump on Matia, says there's Mechulokos, Babai Barava Ad Rabba Shurabam. There are opinions which argue on Abai and Rava against Rabba, who was the Rebbe. That's true. Abai and Rava do argue on the Rebbe Rabba. And I guess we're saying that in those cases, we pass on Abai and Rava over Rabba, even though Rabba was their mutual Rebbe. I think we're talking about probably a three-way machlokes because we have such things. We have three machlokes between Abai, Rava, and Rabba. But I don't think that makes a difference. It's Abai and Rava and Rabba arguing with each other, or Abai and Rava arguing with Rabba. The bottom line is, as possible to pass like Abai and Rava, even though they're the next generation, against Rabba, their Rebbe. But you think about it for a moment. Abai and Rava revolutionized Talmud learning, really, from according to this perspective. And until then, you would always pass on like the Rebbe, and along came Abai and Rava and changed the whole system. And Perek Dalet and the Rush. I guess it's all the Rush speaking. I can't look about Sroy, like the later generation. They showed the first him because they knew what the earlier generation said. The Chokru Bichriu, and they analyzed and they came to determination. It's the principle of although he doesn't say this obviously, but there's a little bit of the principle here of Nanasa Gabe Anak, a dwarf on the shoulders of a giant. No, but it's not necessarily true that the dwarf is not taller than the giant. The giant is much taller than the dwarf. But when the dwarf stands on the giant's shoulders, then he can see more than the giant himself. So, by saying that Allah is like the Talmud, we're not necessarily saying that the Talmud Chas is greater than the Rebbe. We're saying that the Talmud could see things from his perspective, which goes beyond what the Rebbe was able to see because he has more the tools at his disposal. Right nowadays, you come and go to a door. If you have a Bar Ilan program, you can still be a moron. But the fact is, you can get the Bar Ilan program and see many things which your Rabbeim couldn't see. So it certainly doesn't mean you're greater than them. It just means that you have tools which they didn't have.
Right.
Okay. Is that time Elam Medim Halachim be Gemara? Afilu Shatanoim Hayudoim Amaroim. I think that's a mistake. It's supposed to be that time Elam Medim Halachim be Mishnah. We do learn Halacha from Gemara. We don't learn Halacha from Mishnah. Seems to be a typo, although I don't know nobody caught it. But we don't learn Halacha from Mishnah. And that next line clearly indicates it's a typo here. It says, Afilu Shatanoim Hayudoim Amaroim. Right? So I don't know when nobody caught that one. So that's the same principle, right? Because the Rashbam said, Shomer Halacha complaining, the Tanoim, when they said, he gives a different spin than Rashbam. Rashbam says, when Tanoim said Halacha complaining, they, that they said as lomdus, avolo lemaisa. They weren't passing off lemaisa. I'm not sure how the Rashbam knows this. But the Ilu Rabbi Ravashi Shem Sofar Lomru Halacha Mitach Ma'isa. Rabbi Ravashi who came later on and they were called Sof Halach Sofar Ra, the end of Psak. When they said Halacha, they meant Halacha Ma'isa. But this is where Halacha itself changed over time. Okay, pretty amazing stuff today. Okay, Kasav Yud Shin, whoever that is, the Shem Smav. Not knows what we made you shame. The Shafkina Stam Masis. You may have a Stam Mishnah. And only pass like a Halacha like a Stam Mishnah. But we leave the Stam Mishnah alone. We pass Kina Kamaisa. And we have a Maisa, we pass like the Maisa. We should the Maisa Rab. The Maisa is the primary well, the Gemara says Maisa means a Maisa is of vast significance. But when you see somebody doing a Halacha Maisa, then you say, oh, this got to be definite psak. Because he wouldn't have done say Halacha Maisa unless they felt strongly that this is the psak. So if somebody says Halacha, and even if they say Halacha is Mishnah, it's not as strong as seeing something being done as a Maisa. Okay? Because it sounds like Paskin, which is the Maisa Rab. Because Hey, Aleph, Simon Tov Kuf Lamed Vav. The Ma'aser Rav Tvei Mitzvahs Chachamim. Well, that's certainly you stand to leave it. Ma'aser Rav is certainly better than a Svara. It's better than a Mishnah. It's certainly better than a Svara, I think. Because of say Beguvi Allah say Rashba, Yesh Koch L'Kol Amorim L'Sok L'Halacha Ki Yochid. Really?
Wow.
Any Amor can pass like a Yochid. There's a case in Sechet Sukkah where Shmuel said, you better make the prices low when it comes to someone who has Atzim. Otherwise, it's going to pass like Rabbi Shmuel that all that Atzim can be broken. Not to be whole. What?
I didn't follow that. One more time.
There's a case in Sukkah where Shmuel says to the people saying Adatzi, either you lower your prices or going to pass like Rabbi Tarfon that you don't need to have, I think it's every time, they don't need to have Adatsim Shlemi, even broken Adatsim or Kosher. So there it said, he had to say Shmuel has the power to pass it, halacha like a Yochid. And saying that Mora has the power, has the capacity to say, Yochid Rabbi, Yochid Rabbi, but yes, that's generally true. But I have the right to pass it like a Yochid. Rav, the Talmid Rebbe Hava, Shasida Mishnayis, but Rav, who was the Talmid of Rebbe, who arranged the Mishnayis, the son of the Sussman, and made Stam Mishnayis out of some of them. The Rav Havi Bibin Yoneh, and Rav was in that Sanhedrin, in the count literally. When they were the Stam Mishnayis were selected to be Stam Mishnayis, and usually pass the Stam Mishnayis. So Akashir laid the Rav Hechi Shnovi Kabbalah Avi Kravi Meir. Rav could have passed the Rabbi Meir. According to what you just said, Rav is not Mori, he has the right to pass like Rabbi Meir. Why can't we ask? How can we ask the Rav how he passed like Rabbi Meir? The answer is because Rav was Rav, and he was in the group of people around Rabbi Yonasi when they redacted the Mishnah, which was in the status of Rav Tado Poli, Rav Mishnayis. If he said then back then he accepted it and didn't take issue with it, we saw him he acquiesced to that. And therefore, we ask the question: how can he paskin A if Rabbanan and that Mishnah paskin B? He should have spoke up then, or forever held his tongue.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What is the dollar again? No. Okay. When the Tanaim argue the Amoraim, their discussion surrounds as far as one of them. Royally so it's probably the passing like that. Tana. Ki
Shav Hatana.
Sabatano Rabbi. That's interesting. Since the Amoraim discuss the Shita, he's going to now be like a Rabbi. Because he has himself and all the Amoraim who seems to be holding like him. With Amoraim with him, so therefore the halacha should go in his favor. Because Rash must have been Elf Reish Lamed Shita.
Peshuta.
What?
Peshuta.
It's a simple. It's the universal understanding. By the Rishonim, the Kol the Parach Stama. Anytime the Gemara asks a generic question, which goes like, what are the Amoraim in a conversation? Paskin a conversation. Well, I didn't know that. We pass like that opinion. We have the Parach Stama Kechad. So the Amalokava say, but where they do ask a question according to the Gemara, but the general gist of the Gemara goes against him. We don't pay attention to the fact that the Gemara asks a question according to him. That was the asked question from him. The Bahanu lo pork ela the derech honey chaman. They divide such a question. It's a question like, oh, okay, it makes sense according to X. What about according to Y? So basically, this rule ends up not being particularly useful. Because it's saying that, yes, when it answers that question, after the Stam Mishnah from one of the Maroi, that welcome is like we pass like that Amora. But if you ask on a Chilean Mishnah, that doesn't apply. And also, doesn't apply in our case even with the Stam Mishnah. Where we know clearly that halacha is like the other opinion. But the fact that they pass on that, they ask questions with that Amora doesn't prove anything. Okay. Kasa behei al to Mishnah says, Mekalsi Lamora. Yeah, we find many times they praise an Amora. When he says a certain statement, and it's Kavaldik, right? It's an amazing statement the Gemara says, right? They don't feel should keep it alone. It's not because it's the right? The country, the head fact, the opposite. He came up with this shita of his own, which dovetails with the obscure shita of some Tana. And we're impressed with his brilliance, not with his halachic acumen. And he came up with that idea. So the Shabbat of the law, maybe Shem Rabbi. Yes, they praise him. They didn't say name of Chachamim, name Rabbi, then halacha kind name because halacha is not like that statement. Okay, I think we'll stop here for today because this will remember up to the top of the second column there.
Okay.
All right. Have a great week.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.
Enjoy the rabbiing.
This is the first week. Then the next time is another 3 weeks. Okay? Okay, bye.
Okay. Bye.